I want you to try a little experiment with me.
Okay.
Wherever you are right now, maybe you're driving, or maybe you're at the gym, or, maybe you're just sitting on your couch. I want you to visualize your current environment.
All right.
Now imagine shrinking it.
Okay.
Bring the walls in.
Okay.
Closer. Closer. Stop when they are exactly 8 feet apart lengthwise.
Wow.
And 7 feet apart widthwise.
That is incredibly tight. If you lie down, you're almost touching both walls.
Exactly. It's barely enough room to take 3 paces before you have to turn around.
Right.
Now strip everything out of that space. No bed,
Yes.
no chair, no window with a view, just a damp concrete floor, a thin sisal mat, and a bucket in the corner for a toilet.
That's grim.
And imagine the light never really goes out. There's just this harsh bulb burning overhead 24 hours a day, messing with your circadian rhythm, messing with your sanity.
To be honest, it sounds like a psychological torture chamber.
It was. Now imagine staying in that box, or, versions of it. Not for a weekend, not for a month, not even for a year. Imagine the door locks and it doesn't open again for 27 years.
27 years.
That is 10,000 days. 10,000 days of staring at the exact same walls. Most people would come out of that experience completely broken.
Or they'd come out burning with such intense hatred that they just want to burn the whole world down. Which, to be fair, would be the natural human reaction.
Right.
Revenge is kind of the default setting for that level of trauma.
That is. But the man we are talking about today didn't do that. He emerged from that darkness, not with a list of enemies to kill, but with a fully formed strategy to unite the very people who locked him up.
Right.
We're talking, of course, about Nelson Mandela. But, and I think this is crucial for our deep dive today, we are not here to worship the statue.
No, we aren't.
We aren't here to just talk about the saint in the colorful Madiba shirt who smiles and waves.
I'm really glad you said that, because the whole saint narrative is actually a bit dangerous.
How so?
Well, it strips him of his humanity. It makes it seem like he was born with some magical ability to forgive, which kind of lets the rest of us off the hook.
That makes sense.
The truth, based on the biography we've been analyzing for this deep dive, is much grittier. We are looking at a man who was arrogant, angry, a bare-knuckle boxer,
A lawyer.
a bomb maker, and finally, a master strategist.
That is the mission for this deep dive. We want to track the evolution of a human being. How did a boy born in a tiny village with the name Rolilala, which we'll get to in a second, how did he become Nelson?
Right.
How did a student activist become the Black Pimpernel, evading the police in disguises? And how did a prisoner in that 8x7 cell become the first Black president of South Africa?
We're treating this as a case study in resilience and leadership. We really want to understand the mental models he used. I mean, how do you survive 27 years of imprisonment and come out sharper than when you went in?
So grab a coffee, or if you're driving, settle in. We are about to unpack a life that literally changed the moral arc of the 20th century.
Let's do it.
Let's start at the very beginning. The source material takes us back to July 18th, 1918.
Right. To a place called Mvezo in the Cape Province of South Africa. And to really understand Mandela, you have to understand the context of his birth.
He wasn't just some random kid in a village.
Exactly, he wasn't.
The source makes a real point of his lineage. His father was Gadla Henry Mafai-Keniswa, and his mother was Nosekeni Fanny. But his father held a very specific position.
He did.
He was a local chief and a counselor to the monarch of the Thembu people.
And this is a detail that often gets glossed over in the whole poor boy makes good stories. Mandela was essentially aristocracy. He was born into a world of court politics.
Right.
His father wasn't just a leader, he was a kingmaker.
And the source highlights a specific aspect of his father's role that I think is the first major key to understanding Mandela's later life. It talks about how his father would counsel the monarch. He would sit in these tribal meetings.
The great place at Mekwezwane.
Exactly, the great place. And young Mandela would watch these meetings. The source describes them as these long, drawn-out gatherings where everyone, chiefs, commoners, literally everyone was allowed to speak.
Yeah.
And the king would just sit there.
Listening.
Just listening. He wouldn't say a single word until everyone else had finished.
This is a profound leadership lesson, isn't it? It's what he called the shepherd model of leadership.
The shepherd model.
Yeah, you lead from behind. You let the flock move and you guide them, but you don't stand in the front barking orders. Mandela observed that a true leader listens to every opinion, even the ones he absolutely hates, before he forms a consensus.
It's amazing to think that the leadership style he used to negotiate the end of apartheid in the 1990s was actually learned in a village in the 1920s.
Full circle.
He was just applying the tribal method to a modern nation state.
It's the art of making people feel heard. If people feel heard, they are far less likely to fight you, even if you don't give them exactly what they want.
Right. But his childhood wasn't just sitting around listening to speeches. We have to talk about the name.
Oh, yeah.
He was born Rolilala.
Which, if we translate it directly from Xhosa, literally means pulling the branch of a tree.
Right.
But colloquially, it means troublemaker.
Talk about nominative determinism. He was literally born to shake things up.
He really was.
But then he goes to school. He's the first in his family to ever attend school, which is a huge deal. He walks into that Methodist primary school, and on the very first day, his teacher, Miss Mingane, gives him a new name.
Nelson.
Just like that, Rolilaya is gone. Now you are Nelson.
We really need to pause here and look at the violence of that moment.
Yeah.
I don't mean physical violence, I mean cultural violence. Imagine you are a 7-year-old child. You walk into an institution of learning, and the very first thing you are told is that your own name, the name your father gave you, is not good enough.
It's too difficult.
Too difficult, too African. To be educated, to be civilized, you must adopt an English name.
It's complete stripping away of identity. It's the colonial system saying, you can enter our world, but only if you leave yourself at the door.
Exactly. And the fascinating thing is that Mandela accepted it.
He didn't fight it.
He didn't fight it at all at that age. He just took the name Nelson. It shows a certain pragmatism that honestly defines his whole life. He understood that to navigate the system, he had to wear the mask.
Right.
He had to play by their rules, at least on the surface, to get the tools he needed.
It's the Trojan horse strategy. You look like a Nelson, so you can learn what you need to learn to eventually free all the Rolilalas.
That's a great way to put it.
So Nelson moves through the system. He's clearly a bright kid. He goes from the local school to a secondary institution, then to the Methodist College in Fort Beaufort, and finally he reaches the University of Fort Hare.
And for our listeners who might not know the geography or the history here, Fort Hare wasn't just a college. In the context of Southern Africa in the 30s and 40s, Fort Hare was the place.
The ultimate destination.
It was the Oxford or Harvard for Black Africans.
It was really the only place they could go for higher education.
Right. If you were a Black intellectual in South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, you went to Fort Hare. It was an incubator. It's where you met people like Oliver Tambo. It's where the seeds of the entire liberation movement were really watered.
So he's there to get his degree. He's on track to become a court interpreter or maybe a clerk, a respectable middle-class job.
Safe.
Very safe. But then we see the troublemaker come out. The source details his time on the Student Representative Council, the SRC.
This is the first real crucible moment in his life. The students are unhappy, the food is bad, the powers of the SRC are strictly limited, the usual student grievances.
Right.
But they vote to boycott the SRC elections. They basically refuse to participate in a sham democracy.
And Mandela is actually elected to the council, but he refuses to take his seat because of the boycott.
And the principal, Dr. Kerr, brings him in. And this is a classic power play.
Right.
He tells Mandela, you can either take your seat on the council and break the boycott, or you can be expelled.
Think about the stakes here.
They're huge.
He is the first in his family to go to college. His guardian, the regent, has paid for this. His entire future, everything he's worked for, depends on this degree. And he is being told, just compromise. Just sit in the chair.
And he says no.
He packs his bags.
He chooses the principle over the position. It's such a clear foreshadowing of the man he would become. He realized that a degree obtained by selling out his peers wasn't worth the paper it was printed on.
Yeah.
He was willing to disappoint his family, destroy his career path, and face the total unknown, all for a point of integrity.
That is a hard thing to do when you are 22.
Hard to do when you're 50.
Exactly. So he leaves Fort Hare. He's essentially a dropout. And in 1941, he heads to Johannesburg.
The city of gold. Igoli.
And the source describes this period as the grind. I love this part because it demystifies him. He didn't just arrive in Joburg and become a leader instantly. He arrived and he had to really hustle.
He worked as a night watchman at a mine. Can you imagine? The future president of the country standing guard at a gate in the freezing cold.
And this is where the sheer discipline kicks in. The source says he finished his Bachelor of Arts via correspondence courses at night.
I want to highlight that. Correspondence courses. This isn't online learning where you just watch a video on double speed.
Right, no Wi-Fi.
This is receiving thick packets of reading material in the physical mail, studying by candlelight after working a manual job all day, writing essays by hand, mailing them back, and then waiting weeks for a grade.
It requires a level of grit that is honestly just exhausting to think about.
It does, but it also shows his hunger. He knew he needed that degree. He finished the BA in 1943, but he didn't stop there.
No.
He realized that to fight the system, he really needed to understand the rules of the system. So he enrolled at the University of the Witwatersrand-Wits to study law.
And Wits was a totally different world. Fort Hare was all black. Wits was predominantly white.
This was his first real immersion into a multiracial intellectual world. He met white liberals, communists, Indian activists. He met people like Joe Slovo and Ruth First.
It expanded his whole worldview.
Completely. He realized the struggle wasn't just about the tribe or even just about Black Africans. It was about oppression versus freedom broadly.
And while he's studying law, he's also getting much deeper into politics. In 1944, he joins the African National Congress, the ANC. But he doesn't just join the party. He helps found the Youth League.
The ANC Youth League. This distinction is vital. The ANC had been around since 1912, but the old guard of the ANC, how do I put this politely?
They were very proper.
You're a gentleman.
They wrote sternly worded letters to the Queen.
Exactly. They believed that if they were polite enough, dressed well enough, and spoke English well enough, the British and the white government would eventually say, "Oh, you are civilized? Here, have some rights."
Respectability politics.
And it just wasn't working.
Yeah.
Segregation was actively getting worse. So Mandela, along with Walter Sisulu and Oliver Tambo, basically said, enough.
Yeah.
The Youth League was about action, strikes, boycotts, civil disobedience. They wanted to force the issue.
And Mandela rises fast. Secretary by 1947, national president of the Youth League by 1950. He's charismatic, he's a lawyer, he's tall, he's handsome. He becomes the face of the new movement.
But as he rises, the state is watching. And the state is changing too. In 1948, the National Party wins the election and officially implements apartheid.
We should define that quickly for context.
Apartheid literally translates to apartness. Before 1948, there was racism and segregation, sure, but apartheid codified it into a total legal grid.
A system.
A rigid system. It determined where you could live, who you could sleep with, which park bench you could sit on, which door you could enter. It was a cradle-to-grave system of racial control.
And to enforce this, the government passed the Suppression Communism Act,
which was their absolute favorite weapon. In 1952, Mandela is arrested under this act. And let's be very clear, communism in this context was really just a label for disagreement.
Right.
If you said, "I think black people should vote," the government said, "You are a communist."
It was just a convenient way to criminalize any dissent. And it escalates from there. December 1956. This is the big one. He's arrested for high treason.
The treason trial. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. High treason carries the death penalty. He and 155 others were put on trial, and this trial dragged on for years.
Just imagine the stress of that. Trying to run a law practice, trying to lead a massive political movement, trying to have a family, all while sitting in court every single day, wondering if you're going to be hanged.
It was a war of attrition. The state was actively trying to bankrupt them and exhaust them. But, and this is a real testament to his legal mind, they beat the charges. They were actually acquitted in 1961.
But this brings us to what I think is the most cinematic era of his life. After the acquittal, he doesn't just go home and celebrate. He goes underground.
The Black Pimpernel years.
The source describes his period so vividly. Between 1961 and 1962, he's traveling all over the country in disguise. He's dressing as a chauffeur, a chef, a garden boy.
It sounds like an action movie, but let's look at the actual strategy. Why was he doing this? He wasn't just playing dress up for fun. He was building the M plan. The Mandela Plan.
What exactly was the M plan?
He realized that the ANC was going to be banned. If they kept operating as a big open bureaucracy, the police would just arrest the leaders and the movement would die overnight.
Right.
So the M Plan was all about decentralization, breaking the movement into tiny, small street cells. If one cell gets captured, they don't know who is in the next cell.
It's essentially resistance tactics applied to political organizing.
Yeah.
It's creating a network that can survive a decapitation strike by the government.
Precisely. And this is also the period where he embraces the arms struggle, which is controversial. Mandela wasn't always a pacifist.
No.
He co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, the Spear of the Nation. He argued that, and I'm paraphrasing the source here, the attacks of the wild beast cannot be averted with only bare hands.
Right.
He realized that nonviolence simply wasn't working against a highly violent state.
So he's organizing sabotage, blowing up power pylons. He becomes the most wanted man in South Africa. But as we know, the net was closing in. In 1962, he's driving a car disguised as a chauffeur, and he gets flagged down.
And that was it. The end of his freedom.
This transitions us to the dark heart of the story, the prison years. The source says he was sent to Robben Island. He spent nearly 18 of his 27 years there.
Robben Island, a wind-swept rock off the coast of Cape Town. It had been a leper colony. Now it was just a storage facility for the state's enemies.
Let's go back to that cell we visualized at the start. 8 feet by 7 feet.
Think about the sensory deprivation. The source mentions the lime quarry.
Right. They were forced to work in a lime quarry every single day. What was the actual point of that?
There was no economic point. They weren't digging for anything valuable. It was purely punitive labor. They were digging up limestone just to move it around.
Pointless exhaustion.
Exactly. But the lime dust is highly alkaline. And in the blazing sun, the glare off the white rock is blinding.
The source mentions that this actually permanently damaged his eyes.
It did. The tear ducts were deeply scarred. For the rest of his entire life, Mandela couldn't cry tears. He could feel the emotion, obviously, but the physical release of crying was permanently taken from him by that quarry.
That is such a haunting detail. The regime literally stole his tears.
But here is where the real insight comes in from our source material.
Yeah.
How did he survive that? He turned the prison into a university. They actually called it Mandela University.
How did that work? They weren't allowed books, were they?
Very few. Mostly just censored news. But they used their lunch breaks in the quarry. They would huddle together. Walter Sisulu would lecture on history. Mandela would lecture on law. Someone else would teach economics.
Wow.
They refused to let their minds atrophy. They decided that even though their bodies were in prison, their minds were still free to learn.
It's a masterclass in mental compartmentalization. You can lock up my body, but you cannot lock up my intellect.
Exactly. But the absolutely hardest test wasn't the physical labor or the conditions. It was the psychological game. The source mentions the offer.
This is the moment that I think defines his legacy more than anything else. In the 1980s, the South African government was getting desperate. The country was burning. The world was imposing heavy sanctions. They needed a way out. So President P.W. Botha offered Mandela a deal.
And the deal was very simple. We will release you. You can go home. You can see your wife. You can sleep in a soft bed. All you have to do is renounce violence. Just sign a piece of paper saying the ANC will stop the armed struggle.
Let's just pause on that. Put yourself in his shoes. You've been sleeping on a concrete floor for over 20 years. You are getting old. You are missing your children's entire lives. And the door is suddenly wide open. All you have to do is say, okay, I promise to be peaceful.
It is the ultimate temptation. And it's a brilliant trap.
How is it a trap?
If he accepts, he walks free as an individual, but he kills the movement. He legitimizes the government's authority over him. He essentially admits that he was the violent one, not the oppressive state.
So what does he do?
He refuses, and he does it very publicly. His daughter Zinzi read his response to a massive crowd in Soweto. He said, "What freedom am I being offered while the organization of the people remains banned? Only free men can negotiate. A prisoner cannot enter into contracts."
Your freedom and mine cannot be separated. That gives me chills.
It's strategic genius. He leveraged his own captivity. He realized that as long as he was in prison, he was a powerful symbol that the world simply couldn't ignore.
Right.
If he walked out on their terms, he was just a tired old man. By staying in, he kept the immense pressure on the regime. He literally valued the cause over his own physical life.
So he stays. He moves through the system, transferred to Pollsmoor Prison in Cape Town, then to Victor Verster Prison. He's in a cottage now, not a cell, but he's still very much a prisoner. And the calendar pages just keep turning. The 60s, the 70s, the 80s.
And the outside world is rapidly changing. The Berlin Wall falls in 1989. The whole Cold War logic that propped up apartheid just collapses.
And finally, on February 2nd, 1990, the dam breaks.
Yeah.
State President F.W. de Klerk lifts the ban on the ANC and announces the unconditional release of Nelson Mandela.
This was the moment the world held its breath. Nobody really knew what would happen. Would there be a massive civil war?
He walks out of Victor Verster prison, hand in hand with Winnie, fist in the air, that iconic image.
And he doesn't walk out to retire. He walks out to work. He's in his 70s now, remember? Most people are slowing down. He is just starting the biggest job of his entire life.
The transition to democracy.
Yeah.
The source describes the multi-party negotiations, and this wasn't a smooth, easy process.
It was incredibly messy. It was violent. There were massacres happening in the townships. Right-wing white groups were threatening to bomb power stations. Mandela had to walk this impossible tightrope.
Right.
He had to calm his own angry base, who justifiably wanted revenge. And he had to reassure the white minority that they wouldn't be pushed into the sea.
And notice who he dedicates his Nobel Peace Prize to in 1993.
The source notes he dedicated it to Mahatma Gandhi.
This clearly signals his philosophy: reconciliation. He was signaling to the world that the path forward wasn't an eye for an eye. It was building a brand new table where everyone could sit.
Which is incredibly hard to do when the person across the table was literally your jailer, but he did it.
And then, 1994, the election. The images of those voting lines. Miles and miles long.
People standing in the blazing sun for hours, sometimes for days, just to make an X on a piece of paper. The very first democratic election in South Africa's history.
And the prisoner becomes the president. The first black president of the country.
His mission, according to the source, was crystal clear: to kill racism, to end apartheid rule, and to establish a new constitution.
Talk about a massive to-do list. But he does something else that I think is just as revolutionary as his election. And this is a major key takeaway for anyone interested in leadership from our deep dive. After his first term, he just stops.
Yes. He explicitly declined to contest for a second term.
Why? I mean, he's Nelson Mandela. He's a global icon.
Yeah.
He could have easily been president for life. He would have won by an absolute landslide.
And that is exactly why he had to step down. Look at the history of post-colonial Africa and really revolutionary history in general anywhere in the world. The liberator very often becomes the dictator.
Right.
The hero stays way too long. They start to think, I freed this country, so I own it.
The big man syndrome.
Exactly.
Right.
Mandela profoundly understood that for South Africa to be a true functioning democracy, it had to work without him. He had to show that the presidency was a temporary job, not a monarchy.
Yeah.
By stepping down, he set an unshakable precedent. He showed that power must be transferred peacefully. That act of restraint was just as powerful as his act of resistance.
It's the deep discipline of knowing exactly when to leave the stage.
Precisely.
Now, I want to pivot a bit. We've talked about the hero, the strategist, the president. But the source gives us a glimpse into the man's personal life, and frankly, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was complex and it was painful.
Very complex. We have to acknowledge the human cost here. You cannot give your entire life to a struggle without taking that life away from your family.
He had 3 wives over his lifetime. First, Evelyn Mace, who he married in 1944.
That was during the very early years. She was a nurse, very religious, and not particularly political. And Mandela was simply never home. He was always at ANC meetings, always traveling. They just drifted apart. They divorced in 1957.
Then the famous marriage to Winnie Madikizela Mandela in 1958.
This is really the tragic heart of the story. They were a power couple.
Yeah.
They had so little time together before he went underground and then to prison. And while he was frozen in time on the island, protected in a weird way from the daily violence of the streets, Winnie was on the absolute front lines.
She was banished. She was harassed constantly by the police. She was thrown in solitary confinement.
She was tortured. And that profound trauma changed her. She became harder. She became militarized. So when Mandela came out in 1990, preaching peace and reconciliation, she was still very much in war mode. They were just on completely different wavelengths.
The source notes they divorced in 1996 while he was president.
No.
It's heartbreaking. The movement gained a father, but his family lost a husband.
It's the collateral damage of history.
But then there's this lovely, surprising detail the source gives us, a plot twist in the 3rd act. He marries his 3rd wife, Graça Machel.
The widow of the Mozambican president, Samora Machel.
And look at the date on that, 1998.
He was 80 years old.
He married her on his 80th birthday. I absolutely love that detail.
It's beautiful. It shows that he wasn't dead inside. After 27 years of brutal prison, after the very public failure of his marriage to Winnie, after all that global pressure, he was still capable of falling in love.
Yeah.
He still wanted companionship.
It really humanizes him. He wasn't just a symbol on a flag. He was a man who wanted to hold someone's hand.
And Graça brought him a lot of joy in those final years.
After the presidency, he didn't just go play golf and relax. The source says he founded the Mandela Foundation, and he served as a mediator in the Burundi Civil War.
Again, showing the unwavering commitment to peace. He didn't say, I fixed South Africa, my job is done. He looked at the continent and saw other conflicts, other suffering, and tried to use his moral authority to help. He remained a very active global mediator until his health finally failed him.
And finally, the end of the road. December 5th, 2013. He passed away from a respiratory illness at the age of 95.
A life that was truly squeezed of every single ounce of potential.
And the world recognized it. The UN declared Mandela Day in 2009.
Which is a remarkably rare honor. It's a call to action, really. The idea is to spend 67 minutes doing good for others, representing the 67 years he actively fought for social justice.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We've tracked him from the village of Mvezo, watching his father listen to the tribe. We've seen the scholar, the radical disguised avenger, the prisoner on the damp floor turning a quarry into a classroom, the president, and finally the peacemaker.
It's a remarkable arc of expanding responsibility. He started by taking responsibility for himself, then for his tribe, then for the movement, then for the entire nation, and finally for the world.
And through it all, there's this constant thread of education. The source ends with an incredibly powerful quote from him. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world.
And coming from him, that's not just a cliche you put on a motivational poster.
Right.
Remember, he was the first in his family to ever go to school. He studied by candlelight after digging ditches all day. He studied law to fight the apartheid courts. He learned Afrikaans in prison so he could talk directly to his white guards.
That's a great point.
He truly believed that if you understand your enemy and if you understand the world deeply, you can change it without destroying it.
It's a profound takeaway. Knowledge isn't just for getting good grades. It's for liberation.
Exactly.
But before we sign off, I will leave you with one final provocative thought. Something to really chew on as you go about the rest of your day.
Let's hear it.
We talked about the offer. That crucial moment in prison where he was told he could go free if he just compromised a little bit. If he just said what the regime wanted him to say. He spent 18 years in an 8x7 cell and refused to leave if it meant trading in his principles.
It really forces us to look in the mirror.
It does. The question for you is, what value, what core belief do you hold that is so fundamental you would refuse to trade it even for your own personal freedom? Is there anything you believe in that strongly?
That is a heavy question, but it's the exact question that defines the difference between a politician and a true leader.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life of Nelson Mandela. It's been an incredible journey.
It has. A real privilege to discuss it.
We'll catch you on the next one. Keep learning.